dreams. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for being with us. As always, for those of you that don't know, it is Johnny Cash Friday, and we're going to get to some Johnny Cash music here in a moment. Some of his Christmas songs. We were listening to that in the first hour. For those of you who are watching on Facebook.com, ConduitNews.com, or YouTube, you guys are listening during the breaks. You guys are getting the State of the Union address, 1972, Richard Nixon. And anyway, it's pretty fascinating stuff. That was like at Richard Nixon's zenith, just so you know. Pretty fascinating. The telephone number, 870-275-9799. 870-275. You're going to want to keep that number because we're going to be giving away another book this hour because it's Christmas and we want to say Merry Christmas. But we're not ready to give that book away yet. But you want to take that number down for later, 870-275-9799. And then, of course, it's time. Oh, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, that sound means it's time for the Conduit Quiz. And actually joining us now to take the Conduit Quiz, we have good friend, Mr. Hunter Rivet is back with us. Hunter, good morning.
Good morning.
So the quiz that we're going to be taking has to do with the term lobbyist. Most people have a general idea what that means. To many, it means someone who advocates for a special interest, such as a corporation, school, or government entity. There are some organizations such as the Municipal League and the Association of Arkansas Counties whose mission it is to lobby and work for the best interests of the governments in cities and counties, even when those conflict with the best interest of the taxpayers. So we will be exploring that in this week's Conduit Quiz. So you want to stay tuned for that. Okay, so Hunter Rivet, you've already said that you're doing good this morning, and so I appreciate that. But I hope you're still going to be doing good after we see how you score on this quiz.
We'll see. You know, this is a finals week for me, and I've been doing fine. This might be a final I bomb, though.
Oh, no. Well, I hope not. Okay. Question number one. Let's see what we got here. Question number one. Which of the following would qualify a person as a lobbyist and require them to register with the Arkansas Ethics Commission? If you receive income or reimbursement in a combined amount of $400 or more in a calendar quarter for lobbying activities, if the lobbyist expends $400 per or more in a calendar quarter for lobbying activities, or expends $400 or more in a calendar quarter, including postage, for the express purpose of soliciting others to communicate with any public servant to influence any legislation, action, or administration action of one or more governmental bodies, or any of the above, or none of the above. Hunter, which one do you think it is?
Okay. Okay, all of those sound good.
Yeah.
I don't think anything was said that is not true. I'm going to say any.
All right. So you're marking any of the above.
Yeah, any of the above.
Taking that down. Question number two. What must a person disclose when they register as a lobbyist? The name, the name, address, and telephone number of the lobbyist, the types of public servants being lobbied, the name, addresses, and telephone number of the lobbyist clients or employer, the type of business entity which is the lobbyist client or employer, or all of the above or none of the above.
Okay. I need to text my good friend James Sturge and see if he can see it. But I think...
That's a low blow right there.
I think all of those, of course, the address is questionable to some. I'm going to say all of them.
Okay, all of the above. Going with all the above again. Question number 3. What is the penalty for a person if they fail to register as a lobbyist as required? Is it a Is it a fine of not less than $50 and not more than $2,000? Is it a term of imprisonment of between 3 and 6 months, or is there no penalty?
I want to say no. You know what? I think it's a slap on the hand. It's a fine or jail time. So let's just go fine.
Okay.
Fine.
Going with a fine of not less than $50, but not more than $2,000. All right. Question number 4. Does a person have to register as a lobbyist if they are employed by a government entity and lobby on behalf of that entity, such as a school or state agency? No.
No, they don't.
Okay, so you're going with no. So the two.
I know they don't.
Okay, so no, generally government lobbyists do not have to register as a lobbyist and are not considered lobbyists. Now, that's interesting. I want to talk a little bit about that in a second. Question number 5. May a registered lobbyist give legislators a gift, including an advance or a loan? No, lobbyists are prohibited from giving gifts to legislators, including advances or loans. However, there are 14 exceptions to what a gift is defined as. Or yes, lobbyists may give unlimited gifts, including loans, to legislators.
So the first choice, no, said there's 14 exceptions.
Yeah, it says there are 14 exceptions in that answer.
Okay, that sounds like the Arkansas way to do it.
Okay.
So let's go with 14 exceptions.
Okay. All right. I can sense your pessimism, Hunter. So he's going with no on question number 5, but there are 14 exceptions.
Yes.
Yeah.
So basically.
Question number 6. What is the penalty if it is discovered a lobbyist gave a gift to a legislator? Is it effectively none, as the legislator has 30 days from being caught to either return the gift or pay the value of the gift back to the lobbyist? Or is it the legislator may no longer serve in office?
Oh, it's definitely not expulsion, so it has to be repay the fine.
Okay. And you've got...
I mean, you have to be Hitler himself to be expelled, so...
Yeah. So, effectively none. The legislator has 30 days from being caught. So, basically, it's like, I'm sorry, officer. I didn't know I couldn't do that.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've tried that before, and it never works for me. I just have to let it off.
Question 7. What must a lobbyist disclose under periodic lobbyist activity reports? Expenditures of their clients for lobbying activities such as food, lodging, and travel. Or is it special events, including the cost of those government bodies / group of public servants who were invited to the special event? Or is it any gifts or loans to legislators, all of the above or none of the above?
What was the first one?
Expenditures of their clients for lobbying activities such as food, lodging, and travel.
Okay, I'm going to say the first one. Expenditures for food, lodging, and travel.
Okay. That would be all that they have to disclose. All right. Question number 8. Are all the lobbyist registrations and reports publicly available? Yes, they are through the Secretary of State's website. No, only the governor and legislators appointed by the Speaker and President Pro Tem may view the reports.
As much as leadership would like to control that in their great attempt to root out corruption, I think everyone can look at them. So yes.
Okay, so going with yes on that one. And question 9, how many registered lobbyists / lobbyist firms are there in Arkansas for 2018? Is it 57, 129, or 311?
311, the biggest one.
Going with the highest one, 311. Question 10, may lobbyists have special events such as dinners, breakfasts, and lunches for legislators? There's actually only one answer here, so we're going to go ahead and fill it in for you. The answer is yes, if they invite the entire legislative body or a full committee. However, legislators are still able to pocket their per diem checks for food while getting free meals from lobbyists.
What? Oh.
Yeah, so there wasn't even another answer on that one. Okay, so we've got your answers here, and Joe is going to submit them. Yeah, Hunter, what town are you from? We're going to put that in here. We're doing a quiz for you. Are you from Russellville? Go ahead.
Eureka Springs.
Eureka Springs. Okay. That'd be Reka, I believe. There you go. All right, so Eureka Springs, and then he's going to hit OK, and then we're going to get your results.
Okay, let's see. It's because I actually took this yesterday, so if I did any worse, that's not good.
You got a 90. You got 9 out of 10.
But did I miss the very last one?
Let me see. What did you miss?
For me?
Okay, so question 7, you marked A, or expenditures for their clients. The question was, what must a lobbyist disclose under periodic lobbyist activity reports? And so you marked expenditures of their clients. Apparently it was all of the above. So it was expenditures of their clients, special events including the cost, and any gifts or loans to legislators. So they're supposed to disclose all of that stuff. See, but it's ridiculous because if they get caught, Hunter, they have 30 days to correct, their activity that was wrong, illegal, or unethical, or whatever the case may be.
Right.
So anyway, it's interesting. So what was your thought, Hunter? I mean, in taking this quiz, what's your general thought on lobbyists here in Arkansas?
Well, from the questions about the statutes, it seems they're awfully convoluted. There's restrictions on gifting, but if you break that, then you have 30 days to make it up. And like I said, it's really, really nice, a really lax environment there. Like I said, I'm going to head there in a couple of weeks because I need to get a new Jeep, and I'm going to get a loan from the Interlegislator Bank.
Yes.
I hear that's the best place to get a loan. So
it certainly is. It certainly is. If you need fast cash now, then they have a program. They definitely have a program for you down there. But what I really found was interesting here that I wanted to talk about was, you have lobbyist Bruce Hawkins that loaned convicted felon Jake Files $30,000, and they did not report this loan up until he paid it back. And I think he paid it back, and when he paid it back, then it showed up that it had happened, some time ago.
Right.
As if that's going to make it okay. But, the interesting thing here is, how many, if you have somebody like Bruce Hawkins that did that, or you have somebody like David Norsworthy who gave him $80,000, we would love to know that stuff real time and love for there to be actual teeth in the penalty as a penalty if it happens, so that we might, as voters or members of the media, be able to maybe think that there's maybe some other reason why you're supporting a particular bill or issue. Maybe it's not just about, well, the people sent me here to do this. Maybe it has something to do with the money that you're getting on the side.
That's actually more likely the case.
Yeah, I mean, it's really frustrating. But, these questions are meant to educate people, on this whole process. And, right there at the question number 10 there, may lobbyists have special events such as dinners, breakfasts, and lunches for legislators? They tried to claim, back before convicted felon John Woods wrote his issue 3, they said that this was a big problem because you were able to do this and lobbyists could take people out to dinner and stuff. And now, of course, we're supposed to believe that doesn't happen anymore, but they get around it by inviting everybody. So lobbyists can throw parties as long as they invite everybody.
It's just like whenever you're in elementary school and they say you have to invite everyone to your birthday party, even though you don't want everyone there.
Right. That's exactly right. But that's how they're still able to spend all of this money. And really, there is, and Conduit has written about this many times, once you get elected to the State House, once you get elected, to the Senate, there is an indoctrination process that goes on where you are, being cooked for, catered for. They want these legislators to know, who the kingmakers really are, and it's the special interests down there. And the biggest thing in this, Hunter, and I'll get you to respond to it. The fact that these government lobbyists don't have to register as lobbyists, that is the biggest shocker of all. The biggest lobby down there is actually the government lobbying for their own agencies.
I think I was going to say this is the most surprising facet of this to just the layperson, that government agencies actually have their own lobbyists. And then upon that, they don't even have to register, which is so surprising and so very sad.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of people who are totally surprised that, you know, these certain agencies, quote, independent executive agencies, you know, they actually have people lobbying for them on their behalf.
Mm-hmm.
It's very sad.
Hunter Rivet, it's always great to have you on the program, sir. Merry Christmas to you, and we'll talk to you soon, okay?
Oh, okay, talk to you later. Thank you.
All righty, folks. We're going to take a break, going to reset. It is Johnny Cash Friday. We're going to get to some Christmas music, and I appreciate you guys listening. We can't do this show without you listening. Back in a minute.
Personal income, all have been rising. Total employment, real income are the highest in history. New home building starts this past year reached the highest level ever. Business and consumer confidence have both been rising. Interest rates are down. The rate of inflation is down. We can look with confidence to 1972 as the year when the back of inflation will be broken. Now, this is a good record, but it is not good enough. Not when we still have an unemployment rate of 6%. It's not enough to point out that this was the rate of the early peacetime years of the 60s, or that if the more than 2 million men released from the armed forces and defense-related industries were still in their wartime jobs, unemployment would be far lower. Our goal in this country is full employment in peacetime. We intend to meet that goal, and we can. The Congress has helped to meet that goal by passing our job-creating tax program last month. The historic monetary agreements that we've reached with the major European nations, Canada and Japan, will help meet it by providing new markets for American products, new jobs for American workers. Our budget will help meet it by being expansionary without being inflationary, a job-producing budget that will help take up the gap as the economy expands to full employment. Our program to raise farm income will help meet it by helping to revitalize rural America, by giving to America's farmers their fair share of America's increasing productivity. And we also will help meet our goal of full employment at peacetime with a set of major initiatives to stimulate more imaginative use of America's great capacity for technological advance and direct it toward improving the quality of life for every American. In reaching the moon, we demonstrated what miracles American technology is capable of achieving. And now the time has come to move more deliberately toward making full use of that technology here on Earth, of harnessing the wonders of science to the service of man. I shall soon send to the Congress a special message proposing a new program of federal partnership in technological research and development, with federal incentives to increase private research, federally supported research and projects designed to improve our everyday lives in ways that will range from improving mass transit to developing new systems of emergency health care that could save thousands of lives annually. Historically, our superior technology and high productivity have made it possible for American workers to be the highest paid in the world by far, and yet for our goods still to compete in world markets. Now we face a new situation. As other nations move rapidly forward in technology, the answer to the new competition is not to build a wall around America, but rather to remain competitive by improving our own technology still further and by increasing productivity in American industry. Our new monetary and trade agreements will make it possible for American goods to compete fairly in the world's markets, but they still must compete. The new technology programs will put to use the skills of many highly trained Americans, skills that might otherwise be wasted. I will also meet the growing technological challenge from abroad, and it will thus help to create new industries as well as creating more jobs for America's workers in producing for the world's markets. This second session of the 92nd Congress already has before it more than 90 major administration proposals which still await action. I have discussed these in the extensive written message that I have presented to the Congress today. They include, among others, our programs to improve life for the aging, to combat crime and drug abuse, to improve health service, to ensure that no one will be denied needed health care because of inability to pay, to protect workers' pensions rights, to promote equal opportunity for members of minorities and others who have been left behind, to expand consumer protection, to improve the environment, to revitalize rural America, to help the cities, to launch new initiatives in education, to improve transportation, and to put an end to costly labor tie-ups in transportation. The West Coast dock strike is a case in point. This nation cannot and will not tolerate that kind of irresponsible labor tie-up in the future. The messages also include basic reforms which are essential if our structure of government is to be adequate in the decades ahead. They include reform of our wasteful and outmoded welfare system, substitution of a new system that provides work requirements and work incentives for those who can help themselves, income support for those who cannot help themselves, and fairness to the working poor. They include a $17 billion program of federal revenue sharing with the states and localities.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. I want to tell just a little bit about this. Let's see, we talked last hour about what happened in that Michigan town trying to take down the Three Wise Men statue because, you know, that's just extremely, it establishes, you know, the Three Wise Men statues, it establishes state religion, according to them. Did you see that ABC News was mocking President Trump? They couldn't stand it. During the funeral of President George H.W. Bush, ABC News decided to mock President Trump as they kind of, according to the Daily Wire, fantasized about his death and made fun of him. Go to this Twitter account, Joe. Right there, the next one. Yeah, this is ABC News' coverage of the casket of the former president arriving, and they can't help but make an off-color comment about President Donald Trump. Listen.
Presidency is different. It is, in fact, a repudiation of much of what George Herbert Walker Bush and George Walker Bush stood for because the people who voted him wanted that repudiation. So he is part of that line of presidents, part of the will of the people asserting itself. And I think that for all of the different kind of president that he is, certainly different kind of character, different kind of politician, certainly than George Herbert Walker Bush.
Why talk
he
about
shares
the president
with
at
all
all?
the others up there that he is an expression of the will of the American people. So there's continuity and discontinuity, but it's all because of the decisions voters made.
And perhaps a recognition in terms of his involvement in the proceedings by President Trump that he someday will be getting a similar treatment when he passes as a former president of the United States.
Probably a different tone in that funeral.
Perhaps.
First he's going to choreograph it, so there may be more trumpets and
maybe he was taking cues. Yes, he would do it bigger. One would imagine.
It'd be the best presidential funeral ever. No one will ever have seen anything like that.
Stop. I mean, why can't ABC News just cover the funeral of H.W. Bush? Why do you have to bring President Trump into it at all?
An investment in their renewal, an investment also of faith in the American people. They also include a sweeping reorganization of the executive branch of the federal government so that it will be more efficient, more responsive, and able to meet the challenges of the decades ahead. 1 year ago, standing in this place, I laid before the opening session of this Congress 6 great goals. One of these was welfare reform. That proposal has been before the Congress now for nearly 2.5 years. My proposals on revenue sharing, government reorganization, health care, and the environment have now been before the Congress for nearly a year. Many of the other major proposals that I have referred to have been here that long or longer. Now, 1971, we can say, was a year of consideration of these measures. Now let us join in making 1972 a year of action on them. Action by the Congress for the nation and for the people of America. Now, in addition, there's one pressing need which I have not previously covered, but which must be placed on the national agenda. We long have looked in this nation to the local property tax as the main source of financing for public primary and secondary education. As a result, soaring school costs, soaring property tax rates now threaten both our communities and our schools. They threaten communities because property taxes, which more than doubled in the 10 years from 1960 to 70, have become one of the most oppressive and discriminatory of all taxes, hitting most cruelly at the elderly and the retired. And they threaten schools as hard-pressed voters understandably reject new bond issues at the polls. The problem has been given even greater urgency by 4 recent court decisions, which have held that the conventional method of financing schools through local property taxes is discriminatory and unconstitutional. Nearly 2 years ago, I named a special presidential commission to study the problems of school finance, and I also directed the federal departments to look into the same problems. We are developing comprehensive proposals to meet these problems. This issue involves 2 complex and interrelated set of problems: support of the schools and the basic relationships of federal, state, and local government in any tax reforms. Under the leadership of the Secretary of the Treasury, we are carefully reviewing all of the tax aspects. And I have this week enlisted the Advisory Committee on Intergovernmental Relations in addressing the intergovernmental relations aspects. I have asked this bipartisan commission to review our proposal for federal action to cope with the gathering crisis of school finance and property taxes. Later in the year, when both commissions have completed their studies, I shall make my final recommendations for relieving the burden of property taxes and providing both fair and adequate financing for our children's education. These recommendations will be revolutionary. But all these recommendations, however, will be rooted in one fundamental principle with which there can be no compromise. Local school boards must have control over local schools. As we look ahead over the coming decades, vast new growth and change are not only certainties, they will be the dominant reality of this world, and particularly of our life in America. Surveying the certainty of rapid change, we can be like a fallen rider caught in the stirrups, or we can sit high in the saddle, the masters of change, directing it on a course we choose. The secret of mastering change in today's world is to reach back to old and proven principles.
All right, folks, it is Johnny Cash Friday, and of course we're into the Christmas season, and so we are been listening to some of Johnny Cash's Christmas library, and we got more coming your way next. I want to welcome to the program for the first time. We got Mr. Daniel Turner is with us. Daniel's the president of Power the Future. It's a conservative energy group that addresses climate change from the perspective of the American worker. Daniel, welcome to the program, sir.
Paul, thank you so much for having me on, and I love the Johnny Cash Christmas. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's got a ton of those. Johnny Cash, an Arkansas tradition. We're an Arkansas show, and he's just the voice. When he does those voiceovers, I mean, it just sounds like home. Daniel, what made you want to start this group, Power of the Future?
I started this group about a year ago with the sole purpose of calling out the radical environmental green movement. They are engaged on so many energy issues in local small communities, and when they quote-unquote win, when they are successful, what happens? They close down a coal mine, they take away land rights, so people who work in oil and gas suddenly lose their job. And these crazy environmentalists in places like New York or San Francisco celebrate and say, we did something for, quote-unquote, the earth. But what really happens is that regular men and women who work in these communities, in this industry, are now unemployed. And someone had to call out that these groups are phony, they're paid for, and they have a radical agenda. So I started the group myself.
Wow. And I think that's great. I think that's extremely needed, at this point, because there are so many people that think that this concept of man-made climate change, first off, I mean, to me it's incredibly offensive, Daniel, at this point, because, I mean, they're now starting to say, you had the fires out in California. Back a few years ago, we had tornadoes that came through Arkansas and Mayflower and the communities of Mayflower and Valonia. And about that time, the Obama administration put out a report that said that we're going to see more and more tornadoes and big weather events because of man-made climate change. Jerry Brown with the wildfires saying, look, these wildfires are because of climate change, and what they mean by that is man-made climate change. And I find that so offensive because what they are promising is essentially that if you will go our route, if you will allow us to control society based on this idea of man-made climate change, that your home wouldn't have burned down, that your home wouldn't have been blown away, and that's preposterous. Drive less and your home might not have burned down. That's crazy to me.
It is, and when you come to look at what their evidence is for climate change, you use the examples of tornadoes, of the fires that are happening in California. You have to ask, so if California is experiencing these fires because of climate change, how come Oregon isn't? How come Washington isn't? How come Northwest Nevada isn't? The governor of Louisiana, one of your nearby states, he talks about how there's so much coastal erosion in southern Louisiana due to climate change, and he is suing energy companies. But the governor of Alabama doesn't have any climate change on his shores, nor does the governor of Texas, nor does the governor of Mississippi. So it's funny how you can pick and choose when you want to apply climate change, and the consequence is always the same. It's suing energy companies or taking away their right to exercise their industry. And who suffers always are regular men and women who do this for a living, coal miners, oil workers, gas workers, and then the whole nation suffers as our prices skyrocket and as we become energy dependent on foreign nations. So it is a real battle.
We're talking with Daniel Turner, again, the president of Power of the Future. You can find more at powerthefuture.com if you want to know more on this. Daniel, the French, I've got this article here from Reuters, French student unrest gathers momentum. The Yellow Vest protest in Paris. I mean, they so far they've been successful in terms of, I mean, I know they've been, destroying property and people have gotten hurt and it's turned violent. But I just kind of feel like that's par for the course with France. We know what their revolutions look like historically, but they were successful in getting Macron to cave. And he's saying I'm backing off the climate change gas tax, but then his approval rating has sunk even more, going from 22% down to 18%. What is your reaction to what's going on, and President Trump tying this to the Paris Climate Accords? What's your reaction to all this?
Exactly. If these folks in Paris were protesting for any other issue, it would have been wall-to-wall coverage by the mainstream media, and your anchormen would have been there on the streets with their camera crews doing live coverage. But because they were protesting a climate change tax, the media basically hushed up the story. Emmanuel Macron was raising taxes to the point that a gallon of gas in France would have cost over $7. And the reason why is he said we need to punish people for using fossil fuels to address climate change. And the regular folks of France who cannot afford this tax took to the streets in protest. And yeah, after a week of violent protests, 4 people died. I mean, it was a tragedy what happened, the amount of damage and death. But the president of France had to back down and say, all right, we're not going to put this forward. But this is the radical agenda people like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are trying to push down in America. These are the types of punitive taxes. They want to punish people for using fossil fuels. And yet a little article broke yesterday. Bernie Sanders, in the last month of the campaign, spent $300,000 on private planes. I wrote about it on our website, collegefuture.com. So he took private planes at the cost of $300,000 to go around the nation and tell us to not use fossil fuels. So the high priests of the climate change religion are all a bunch of phonies and frauds. It's a made-up hoax. It's used to drive a radical agenda, and that's why my organization tries to stop it.
You mentioned that it's a religion, and I agree. I think it is. I think there are people that do hold to this concept. I've called it Gaia worship before. But I mean, yeah. I think a lot of that on the progressive left, it is a religious dogma to the point where if you disagree with them, you're a heretic, and they approach every argument on the basis that they're already a better person than you are.
Exactly, and that's why they have to use the language of religion. So you have to believe in climate change. They ask you to believe in science. If you don't, you are called a denier. There is nothing more unscientific than saying you have to believe in science. Right? The idea of consensus is not a scientific notion. So they have to use language of faith and religion to push this. The last climate report that came out that people said was damning to the administration, the White House released it after Thanksgiving. They were required by law to release this report. They are required annually to release this report. But when they put these reports out, climate change activists, they always do things like play with the data. So, for example, they used hurricanes since the 1970s and said, look at this chart. Since the 70s, the number of hurricanes have increased. If you extended that chart 150 years, and we have the data for 150 years, you'll notice the chart is absolutely unchanged. Everything is normal. They're not stronger. They're not more frequent. So why did they use data from just 1970? They manipulated it to scare people into thinking we have more dangerous hurricanes than we ever did. Same as you mentioned, Paul, with tornadoes. They pick and choose what data they want to use to push this religion, and they have to be called out for it.
You know, even if they were right, we're talking with Daniel Turner, president of Power of the Future. Even if they were right, Daniel, and we have caused this, and we've caused the weather, I don't understand how, if we were to stop doing the things that are causing people's homes to be blown away and burned down and causing the hurricane, how in the world, as complex as the weather patterns are, as complex as the world is, how in the world would we ever be able to tweak this or tweak that and make and control the weather? Essentially, what we're talking about is controlling the weather. It's not a thermostat. We can't just go to the wall, and say, oh, okay, we're going to, no more weather, no more violent weather events. I mean, what they're promising is impossible.
And they would get to decide who gets to use fossil fuels when. Again, a lot of this has a real sort of Marxist undercurrent.
Yes.
They like state control of industry, and they would want to say that we get to decide how long you can have your lights on, when you can use your car, how far you can drive. That is part of their belief. The largest polluters in terms of CO2 emission right now are in Asia. It is China, it is India, it's Indonesia. Americans' CO2 emissions are actually down 2%. So if these radical green groups really want to talk about pollution or carbon output, they should be setting up shop in China and India. Why don't they? Why doesn't Greenpeace and the Sierra Club pick up their headquarters and move to India and China? They know that they're not going to have the quality of life, the freedoms that they have here in the States, so they push an agenda to punish Americans when we are not a country that pollutes. There is a very strange un-American belief about the radical green groups. They want to believe the worst of us. They want to believe that we pollute, that we're dirty, that we don't care about the environment. And if you spend time in rural America like I do, and I'm sure you do, no one loves the earth more than the men and women who own that earth. They don't poison their water. They don't pollute their air. They care deeply deeply about the earth. And this idea that we cannot have a clean environment and a robust economy, that's a false narrative. And we have to stop having people believe it's either or.
Lastly, the president, like he always tends to do, he speaks the obvious, plain truth. And it's almost like President Trump is aware that the American public can have like a bad long-term memory. And, when he pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord, that was a long time ago. And so back to France, he's looking at what's happening in France. And he's basically saying, oh, yeah, the French people agree with me. I was right to pull out of that Paris Climate Accord because of, because America was getting a raw deal. France is getting a raw deal. And he states the obvious. And what happens? I mean, the media absolutely lose their minds, and they start writing articles about how, he's trying to pump himself up and all this other stuff. But what he's actually doing is reminding the public and connecting two very important issues that do have a lot to do with one another.
Absolutely. The people in Paris were chanting, "We want Trump. We want Trump." You don't think MSNBC was going to put that on live coverage, do you? But you're absolutely right. This is what happens when you buy into these globalist treaties like the Paris Climate Accord. And he was right to pull America out. We're not going to let some world body dictate our economy and our economic future. And you have to feel bad for the people of France. Gas and oil is already very expensive there. Energy as a whole is very expensive in Europe because they are not producers, right? They have to import almost everything. A lot of it, unfortunately, they import from Russia, but they are importing from the United States and Canada. They used to import from Iran until the president, with his stronger sanctions, stopped them from doing that. But life is expensive in Europe. Energy is expensive in Europe. And then to add on top of that these additional burdens in the name of climate change, it makes you scratch your head and wonder, why does the president of France dislike the French people so very much? And I'm glad we have a president who tries to make the life better for your average American.
You mentioned globalism. I was talking about this in the first hour. I think the French people, I think it is more than just the gas tax. I think it's generally the globalist policies that are selling France out. I think that's why people in Wisconsin and in Pennsylvania voted for President Trump as well. I think it's interesting that we're two different countries, two different areas of the globe, but we are kind of having the same problems. And I think that means that the globalist policies have somewhat been successful, right? America is worried about our immigration policy, worried about our borders. That's very much the case in Europe and in France and in the UK. Here in America, we're also worried about, being taxed too much, or, our federal government, taking the money from the states and sending it back with strings attached. That's also a big problem in the European Union. Giving the money, from France to the EU, and then they give it back to you and tell you what you must do with it. I think that is something that's gone underreported, but I think that's globalism, and I think there's a big backlash against it right now.
I think you're absolutely right, and that's part of the America First mentality that President Trump has been pushing in our nation, but also within our nation. There is a little bit of that sense of, I don't want Washington telling us what to do, and people are voting with their feet. High state taxes like New York and California continually have mass exoduses, and people are going to more fiscally responsible states like Florida and Texas and North Carolina. The sad thing is they usually bring their crazy environmental ideas with them, and so you are finding these states that are starting to adapt policies that look like the states that they were fleeing. And so states, unfortunately, like Colorado, are trying to push climate change narratives. And it's not because the people of Colorado want it. It's because a bunch of Californians who can't afford that state moved in, and they brought their terrible ideas with them. So we have to do a really good job educating our citizens. If people move to Arkansas, you have to make them take a little test, maybe.
No,
so they
you're
don't
right.
bring their lousy ideas with them from Boston.
No, you're exactly right, and we see that. We see people that do move here sometimes. They definitely, especially with Walmart headquarters here, that attracts a lot of different types of people that maybe aren't necessarily from here, and they kind of can come with more liberal ideologies. And so I think everybody has that problem in a lot of ways. Hey, Daniel Turner, president of the Power of the Future. Go to powerofthefuture.com if you want to know more. Daniel, It's great to meet you, sir. I'd love to do this again sometime.
I would love to, Paul. It's an honor. Thank you so much. And you have a very Merry Christmas to you and your listeners.
Yes, sir. Merry Christmas. Daniel Turner, everybody. We're going to take a break. Back in just a moment.
An investment in their renewal, an investment also of faith in the American people. They also include a sweeping reorganization of the executive branch of the federal government so that it will be more efficient, more responsive, and able to meet the challenges of the decades ahead. 1 year ago, standing in this place, I laid before the opening session of this Congress 6 great goals. One of these was welfare reform. That proposal has been before the Congress now for nearly 2.5 years. My proposals on revenue sharing, government reorganization, health care, and the environment have now been before the Congress for nearly a year. Many of the other major proposals that I have referred to have been here that long or longer. Now, 1971, we can say, was a year of consideration of these measures. Now let us join in making 1972 a year of action on them. Action by the Congress for the nation and for the people of America. Now, in addition, there's one pressing need which I have not previously covered, but which must be placed on the national agenda. We long have looked in this nation to the local property tax as the main source of financing for public primary and secondary education. As a result, soaring school costs, soaring property tax rates now threaten both our communities and our schools. They threaten communities because property taxes, which more than doubled in the 10 years from 1960 to 70, have become one of the most oppressive and discriminatory of all taxes, hitting most cruelly at the elderly and the retired. And they threaten schools as hard-pressed voters understandably reject new bond issues at the polls. The problem has been given even greater urgency by 4 recent court decisions, which have held that the conventional method of financing schools through local property taxes is discriminatory and unconstitutional. Nearly 2 years ago, I named a special presidential commission to study the problems of school finance, and I also directed the federal departments to look into the same problems. We are developing comprehensive proposals to meet these problems. This issue involves 2 complex and interrelated set of problems: support of the schools and the basic relationships of federal, state, and local government in any tax reforms. Under the leadership of the Secretary of the Treasury, we are carefully reviewing all of the tax aspects. And I have this week enlisted the Advisory Committee on Intergovernmental Relations in addressing the intergovernmental relations aspects. I have asked this bipartisan commission to review our proposal for federal action to cope with the gathering crisis of school finance and property taxes. Later in the year, when both commissions have completed their studies, I shall make my final recommendations for relieving the burden of property taxes.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, Contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
And providing both fair and adequate financing for our children's education. These recommendations will be revolutionary. But all these recommendations, however, will be rooted in one fundamental principle with which there can be no compromise. Local school boards must have control over local schools. As we look ahead over the coming decades, vast new growth and change are not only certainties, they will be the dominant reality of this world, and particularly of our life in America. Surveying the certainty of rapid change, we can be like a fallen rider caught in the stirrups, or...
All right, well, welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. And it was a good interview with Mr. Turner there about climate change. What is going on in France and spreading to these other European countries? It's like 90,000 French police have been activated for protests that are supposed to start in France on Saturday. So we'll be monitoring that, but that doesn't sound like the best case scenario. I've been following Donald Trump Jr. on Twitter. He says some of the best stuff. Matter of fact, he responded to Kristen Gillibrand. We talked about this yesterday, where Kristen Gillibrand said, "Our future is female." And Donald Trump Jr. said, "Good to know. My girls will be excited about this. When's it appropriate to let my boys, 9, 7, and 6, know that there's no future for them? Not sure this is a winning platform, but you be you." Very interesting. Immediately exposing the bigotry of the statement, right? The tolerant left that is really not tolerant at all. And let's see, we also have this story over at conduitnews.com. Be sure to go to conduitnews.com and check out their check out the store. You want to click on store. You want to get the mugs. It is Christmas time. So you want to get the mugs. And we're also going to give away one more item today. We're running out of time. Okay, we're going to give away the next caller a Christian Manifesto, which is another book by Francis Schaeffer. So we've given away, what did we give away? One book already, How Shall We Then Live? We gave away a T-shirt, and now we're going to give away one more book. And it's Francis Schaeffer's A Christian Manifesto. It would make for a great Christmas present for somebody if you've never read it. The number, 870-275-9799. As we close the show, the next caller, 870-275-9799, will give you a copy of this book. We'll mail it to you today. 870-275-9799. That's all the time we have for today. Merry Christmas, folks.